Dear learners, once again welcome back to Swayam NPTEL course on library automation and networking. Now we are in week 2nd, module 2nd, housekeeping operations and library services, the lecture number 9, library automation, areas of library automation, that is serial control. Dear learners, we have learned about almost all the major areas of library automation such as acquisition, technical division, then circulation division. As I told you that we have mentioned in two separate categories that the works which are happening behind the screen and the works which are happening in front of the users. So these are all different two categories where we make a categorization of sources or services which are happening in a library. So whatever works we are doing behind the screen where the users are not allowed to see that and they will not be able to come to know that what are the things which are happening in the library. So once you make such kind of procedures, that means you are making a particular resource available for the users within acquisition and technical processing, and where the users are allowed to get the details of a particular resource in the circulation division. So when we talk about circulation division, we have seen that these are all dealing with the transaction procedures. That means you are doing a daily transaction where the people come to the library and they use the resources as a reference service, and sometimes you do the transaction procedures where they can go to their own convenient places and read the resources. So apart from this, we have seen that all these procedures which are mainly focusing on print resources or the documents, or we will call them as books. Similarly, we have one more area, that the nature of collection, that we call it as serials. Serials will be also called them as periodical, or that is the reason why this particular division is called as either serial control or periodical control, or serials division or periodical division. So let us look into this particular aspect one by one. So what do you mean by a serial, or what do you mean by a periodical, and what is the difference between serial, periodical, magazines, etc. So when we talk about serials, we can collectively call them as some kind of a publication which comes in a serial manner. So that is the name indicates. Even in the similar way, when you talk about more specifically, it is having some kind of a periods or periodicity. That means it can have a daily, it can come even in a weekly manner, fortnightly or monthly or half monthly, that we call it as bi-monthly, or quarterly, once in 3 months, or half yearly, once in 6 months, or annually, sometimes we call them it as yearly, that means once in a year. And sometimes there are some publication which can come even in a regular manner. So, or even some publication which comes in irregular manner. In both the categories, we can call them as serials. That means it is, though it is irregular, but it is having some kind of a sequence. So normally when you talk about a particular journal, so it is based on the content or based on the users in which it is targeting. And sometimes if you say a magazine, magazines can be a general nature, right? So when we talk about a particular journal, it will be very specific. That means the articles which are written by an expert, as well as this particular article will be focusing on a particular user group. That means you will be having both the criteria, that one can be the content of the resource and the other can be the targeted group. So in these two ways, we can segregate the serials, publications, periodicals and magazines. Magazines are always a kind of publication in which it focuses more on audience, which are general in nature, and it can even also have the advertisements also. So these are all the general resources which can accommodate in a particular division, that we call it as periodical division or serial division. So how do we manage these resources, and how perfectly we organize all these resources? Unlike books, it comes in a sequential order. So say for example, if somebody comes for a request for a particular book, that book can be recommended and that book can go for all the procedures what we have discussed, and we will get the approval, we will buy that particular resource for the library one time. That means your complete process have been completed. But whereas when you consider a serial publication or a periodical, it is having a continuous process. That means it is not in one issue, it can be many issues. Sometimes a particular journal or a particular periodical can have more than 50 issues per year. That means each and every time you need to have some kind of a track on these resources which are coming on time, whether they have a missing issue, whether they have some kind of a discontinuation, delay of reaching it, or is there any communication gap. So all these publication details and its transaction details, arrivals, etc. need to be completely recorded. So when we talk about serial publications, which are very much sensitive in nature, why? Because unlike books, these are all publications which are the information contained in that particular publication is very up to date. That means users want it like a hot cake. So unless until you provide them on time, there is no relevancy for giving, say for example, you are giving a particular magazine or a journal after its 1 year of publication. So sometimes the relevancy comes down because that particular research or a piece of research which is very recent, that has to be read by a particular user on time, otherwise the relevancy will come down. So you have a higher responsibility than a particular book to get a particular serial publication within a stipulated time. So that has to be maintained properly. So for this you need to have a complete track of that. So let us discuss how these things are happening in a traditional environment first, so that you will be able to understand more about how do we go for or how do we perform automation in this particular area. There are many factors which are to be considered when you go for a subscription of a particular journal. So we should be able to aware that this particular, see in any case like book, even for a serial also there will be a recommendation. So the users will come with a recommendation that has to be accepted by this particular person who is responsible for this particular session, and he will be checking the duplication. That means whether this particular publication is already been subscribed by the library or not. So once it is decided, so then the next stage is to get the complete details of that particular publication. So how this particular publication is published, what is the frequency, what is the price, and who is the publisher, and what is the chance of getting this particular resource, and who will supply this particular resource to you. So all these things, including the price and including the conversion date, because many of the times the journals can be a foreign journal where the price policy will be a foreign currency, so that the currency conversion date also you should get a complete idea about the particular recommendation to be proceeded with further actions. So once everything is clear, as usual how the book's recommendation proceeded, even in the same way you will be getting an approval, administrative approval, and as well as the financial approval from the committee. Once it is clear, then you can go for a subscription. So when you talk about the factors, library budget, subscription price of serials, delay in process, and there are many cases like government policies on import of foreign serials, foreign exchange problems and currency conversions, issues related to missing issues, space for preservation, access issues with a limited number of copies, and if you are providing like online access, there should be a proper infrastructure. That means you should have adequate terminals to provide the such kind of access to the resources which are available online. So these are all need to be considered. But apart from that, we need to have to be concentrated on one of the major aspects of subscription of any journal. Unlike books, how we proceed with the journal is to have a advance payment. That means any journal, if you are going for a subscription, you need to make an advance payment. That is a risky procedure, that is a challenging task, that you are paying something in advance or you are getting the consignment in the later stage. So it is always a challenging job for a particular person who is taking care of this particular activity. So you should be very clear about all these challenges before you proceed to subscribe a particular journal or a particular serial publication. So let us look into the manual procedures which are following in the serial control division. That means you will be getting a particular recommendation form in a prescribed format. You will be checking that. Once the duplication is not there, you will go for all the policies, like you will be getting an administrative approval as well as the financial approval. So once it is done, you will check for a vendor, whether how the vendor is able to supply this, whether he will be able to get it on time, whether you should contact the publisher directly. So all these things will be done at this stage. So once these two things are clear, you need to make a purchase order. So unlike book, the purchase order can be made in the same way, but you need to include the details of payment which has been already done. That means you have to make an advance payment for the whole year issue in advance. So in that case, the details of the transaction which has been made by you also need to be included in the purchase order. Once it is done, that means you have made the purchase order, along with that you have made the payment also. The advance payment details has been included in the purchase order. So everything is clear. Now you are sending this purchase order to the supplier or the vendor. Now you wait for the issues. That means it's not like books where we get first issue and then we close the matter. Here we have to get all the issues for that particular period in which you have already paid the amount. So we have to wait each and every time this particular issue has to come. So once it is done, that means once it has come on time, the transaction has been completed for that particular period. But till you have to wait the end of the year so that the subscription can be completed. So how much amount you paid, how much you have received, that should be having a proper track. So you should be always in a position to know that how many missing issues are there, how many issues are in transaction or transit, or how many issues are yet to receive, and how many issues we have already received, and how many will be the complementary. Sometimes we will get a complementary copy also, and how many are complementary or how many are supplementary. All these details, whether we have properly recorded. So all this information should be available with you in a serial control division. And say for example, suppose you have not received a particular issue on time, then you have to make a claim for that. That means, so you can make a claim in two ways. One is you can wait for the last date, and then if you don't get it, then you can make a query for that or a claim for that for the missing issues. Or else you can send a reminder for that particular vendor or the publisher where you are directly dealing with. Make a communication with them that this is the deadline of receiving this particular publication, so we have not received up to this time, so you please let us know the status. So these are all the different aspects where you can make a reminder or you can claim for a missing issues. And if at all you are not able to get a missing issues at the end of the year, there is another mechanism that you have to get it something like a reimbursement or refund for that particular issue in which you are missing. So there should be a procedure for that, that also has to be followed in the manual system. And apart from that, how many you have received this year, how many you have new subscription, how many you have discontinued, how many you have renewed, all the statistics, all the reports, all the details, all the pricing details, everything should be required in this particular division where we call it as serial control. And when you look at the user's point of view, as we know that these particular publications are not for issue. So serial publications are always for reference purpose. But there are some cases where we cannot deny the genuine cases, like people come and ask for a issue return. So in such cases, there are libraries, they do such kind of activities that you may get users will come for a issue of a particular journal. So that we call it as overnight issue. There is a provision for issuing that particular journal for an overnight. That means if a person takes a particular journal in the late evening, he or she has to return that particular journal on the next working day in the morning itself. So if there is no return, then there will be overdue, there will be a fine system. So though there are challenges in that, but still we need to make some kind of a convenience for the users so that they can make use of such kind of an opportunity to read the resources from their convenient places also. In that cases also, you should have a proper mechanism to record all the transaction details. And apart from this, that means once you have completed all the procedures like purchasing, renewing, and then subscribing, and then getting the statistics and resources, all the transactions has to be properly maintained, and the record should be maintained properly, and all the data which are available throughout the year and as well as all the years in which you have started should be properly maintained and properly documented. So dear learners, as we have seen that how these procedures, serial control division is working in a particular environment where the traditional methods are followed, or how these people are working in a manual system or in a traditional library system. But when it comes to conventional or contemporary system where we are using the support of automation or support of computerization, where we will be having a different mechanism to follow all these technologies or follow all these transactions which are happening, which are related to serial control. As we have seen that how the manual system works, even the same procedures we have to follow in the automated system also, but the things that this routine works or the workflow will be maintained or managed by the computers, so that you will have a error-free reports and statistics, and all your transactions, all your details will be coming in a proper manner, so that you will not be having much issues with the missing or the issues which are not properly coming to the library. When we follow this automated mechanism in a serial control division, the first thing is, as I told you, that we need to receive a recommendation form. So in a manual system, we receive the recommendation form through a printed manner or printed material, like manual system how we follow. But when it is automated, you can receive such kind of a suggestions or recommendation through an online form. So it can be checked easily through the computers how many resources you are having, because you already have the holdings of serials. So this can be cross-checked with the recommendation given by a user. So once it is done, you need to decide whether to go for a fresh subscription, or if it is already there, where to go for a renewal, or whether you need to discontinue it. So how do we decide all these things? So there are many mechanisms to decide. Suppose you already subscribe a journal. So how do we further proceed that means you are going to renew next year. So how do we decide that whether to renew or discontinue or cancel it? So it is based on many parameters, like we need to ask that particular person, as unlike books we don't have any usage statistics for a particular journal, whether a particular person has utilized this resource or not. So in such cases what you require is, personally you need to ask that particular person who has recommended that particular journal first time. So once it is clear, he says that okay, I require this particular journal, so then it is clear that you cannot discontinue. But the next step is you have to check the availability of fund. So if it is available, then you have to check the duplication, whether it is already available in the library or not. We need to check also how the last year's experience, that means whether this particular publication has come on time, whether the publisher is established, whether they are publishing on time, whether they are supplying on time, whether you are getting all the issues, do you have any missing issues, if there is a missing issues, how they are responding to the communications and claims, how they are refunding the amount, and all these procedures have to be checked. So once it is okay that you feel that everything is going good and this particular journal is okay, then you need to see the price. That means in the case of journals, every time there is an escalation of prices, it always will be higher than the previous years. So we can always see that even if you buy some 10 journals for 10,000 rupees this year, you will not be able to buy all those 10 journals for the same amount for the next year. That means every time there will be a 5 to 10% hike in the journal, and it is unimaginable if there is a leading publisher and they are holding the complete copyright of a particular journal which nobody can supply. These challenges will be always there with you, so you need to check properly the availability of fund as well as the price or how much amount has been increased in this particular year. So once it is done through online, so you have received and then you have checked the funding, because you have all the database of funding, budget, how much transaction you have done and how much amount you have already given. So all these details are readily available in the system. So this is one of the biggest advantage, that whatever you want, say for example vendors list, it can be categorized or it can be filtered using any parameters. And say similarly, if you wanted to get what are the details of this particular journal, on how much we have paid, whether it has come on time, when we have received. So that means each and every transaction details of a particular journal or particular periodical, with that financial calculation, budget, everything will be feeded in the computer, so that it is easy for you to retrieve all the data whenever you require to calculate some kind of a statistics or reports. And once it is done, now you can proceed for the next year's purchase order. It is already available, that purchase order, there will be a template, so you can proceed with that. You no need to make, only the advance payment details has to be made in the purchase order, and all other details are already available, and you have selected the vendors. If you are okay with the vendors who are supplied last year, so that can be proceed. So all the procedures which will be continuation of last year, and you no need to do any kind of a manual work which has been already done in the system. So this is the biggest advantage when you go for automation of serial control. And apart from that, once you receive, recording all these details is very easy, because each and every field is ready for you to record all the issues and how many volumes are there, how many issues are there, how many missing issues are there, and whenever you get a particular publication delayed, you will get an alert mechanism, so that within the system you can make a claim, or we can send an email through this particular automation system you are using to the vendors. So all these predefined templates or formats will be highly useful for you to make such kind of communication. Apart from that, once you receive and you have completed the transaction, it is even for the users to get, suppose if you are going for an issue return process, it is also easy for them when you make a barcode or any kind of such kind of a technological advancement in this particular transaction. So that will also be enabled, and then lot of time and energy can be saved in that way, so that you will be satisfied as well as the users will be satisfied. And unlike book, so once all these procedures are completed, as we know that once we have completed a particular year publications, then we need to go for a binding process. So binding also one of the tedious job a particular section has to take care, even in the case of a journal as well as book. But in the case of a journal, normally the binding procedures is not for a single issue, it for a complete issue or a complete volume. Based on its thickness of the volume, we go for the binding, but it has to be corrected properly. So you need to have a report how many are missing, how many are already accompanied by a supplementary or complementary copy, or how many are properly maintained. So all these details should be available in the library. So this serial control module will help you to get all the details, so that binding process also will be easy. And apart from that, the details of the binding person also will be available with that, so that you will be easy to make such kind of transaction procedures very easily, and you will have all the records of binding details. So there are many advantages for automated serial control system. One of the most important advantage is it can considerably reduce the time. That means you can save lot of time, so that that same time can be used for some other constructive purpose, and users can also save the time for getting the resources. And if you are providing the details of this particular resource in your OPAC, so it is easy for them to search through OPAC and find out the resources. When it has come, if you provide them new arrivals list, so that also will be a added advantage for them, so that they will be getting the details on time. And apart from that, you can do, unlike manual system, you can do a perfect process of transaction like cancellation or renewal or return, or any kind of such kind of a transaction can be perfectly done in the serial control module. The speed of the operation can be high, as well as all the transaction details will be intact in this particular module. Apart from this, you can provide table of contents facility for this particular journal, so that the users will come to know that whether this particular journal is containing the articles which are very much relevant for his or her areas of study. So they can come to the library. So without coming to the library physically, they can search this particular resource through OPAC, and through the table of contents, if you scan through table of contents, they will be coming to know that is there any relevant article, so that they can come to the library and use that particular resource. Even in the similar way, when you go for online resources, that is also similarly advantageous for the users. When you are providing access campus wide or remote access or user ID and password access, they will be happy to receive the resources in their desktop without physically coming to the library. Apart from this, you can generate so many reports, like using a particular module in the serial control. You can make n number of reports which are useful for the users as well as the library. Even the alphabetical list of subscription can be made, and publisher wise or national international wise or subject wise, content wise, even the price wise. So whatever permutation combination you wanted to use for segregation or arranging the subscription, that can be possible through the reports or the statistics. And apart from that, there are many softwares which can be used for electronic resources management, that we call it as electronic resource management software. There are many such software which are available in both commercial as well as open source platforms. So you can be able to create various reports like payment reports, transaction reports, publisher wise reports. So all the reports can be made through this particular option. That will be highly advantageous rather than in the traditional environment. Dear learners, let me conclude with this particular discussion. So when we talk about serial control division, it is one of the sensitive area, we can say, because of information it contains, because we always have an up-to-date information in the serial control division. Unlike books, this particular subscription has to be done in advance. That means we have to pay advance amount to get that particular subscription, and the subscription need to be keep on watching that whether it is coming on time, whether people are getting it on time, is there any missing issues, if there is a missing issues, how do we claim for that, how do we get the issues on time, if there is an incapability of supplier or the publisher to provide a particular issue, then how do we get the refund for that. So all these matters are very challenging job for a person who is responsible for the serial control division. But when you compare to the manual system, when you automate this particular serial control division, you will be having a lot of advantages, and all the details, all the reports will be intact, and you will be able to get all the transaction details, including the fund analysis and the reports, visualization. So dear learners, I hope that you have learned about the serial control division in both the ways, how do we manage in a traditional environment and how you will be able to manage when you go for an automated system. So I advise you that you can have many of the electronic resource management system. There are many resources under open source and commercial software. Whenever you get time, you can go through this particular area so that you will be able to, like print resources in the serial control, in the same way you can manage the electronic resources which are part of serials control. Thank you.